Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Like many of you, going to Embry-Riddle, I have a certain interest in the field of aviation. Also, like many of you or some of you, I am prior military. Some of you are active military, and some of you are just regular civilians. With that being said, we all have a general interest in aviation, and that's how we go to Embry-Riddle. Now, I've come into a problem recently, and where I was transitioning from the military into the civilian sector. One of my biggest worries was finding a stable career from the military into the civilian workforce. In the military, I was a helicopter mechanic for the Marine Corps. So I had some maintenance technician experience in the military. Like I said, my biggest worry was transitioning that experience into getting a job or career outside. So I will go over how to get your airframes and power plants certification, or one or the other airframes or power plants, based off your military experience, which some of you or most of you have. Now, first things first, um, the requirements and the guidelines set forth to get your A&P certification are put in place under the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 14, Part 65.71 through 65.91. There you can find all the requirements for certificated individuals for the Federal Aviation Administration, which is the organization that governs aviation in America. Now, that's a lot of things that I just said, but in the aviation industry, the Federal Aviation Administration is a governing body that controls everything that is aviation related in the US. Within that body, they have set guidelines that they follow per federal regulations, the Code of Federal Regulations, there's a chapter in the Code of Federal Regulations that deals with individuals that are trying to become certificated individuals in the Federal Aviation Administration's eyes, whether it be mechanics, pilots, repairmen, parachute riggers. There's a breakdown for each job and what is required to gain that certificate to be able to deal with aircraft and aviation in America. Now, for this for this presentation, I will show you how to become a mechanic on the airframes and power plants components of aircraft per the Federal Aviation Administration. Like I said, in Title 14, Part 65.71 through 65.91, it details the requirements. Now, the first thing that it details is you have to be 18 years or older. You have to graduate from high school, have a diploma, but it also says you have to have 30 months of on-the-job training time experience, or shadowing time, which is you pretty much follow a mechanic to see how he's doing, or you're his assistant or his helper. Now, as military members, we get the benefit of having our job in the military, whether you had a career for 4 years or for 20 years, count as time towards that certificate. It is required that you have 30 months experience on whatever MOS, which is military occupational code that you had. Now, an MOS is a military job. Like I'm about to say, not all jobs count. You could be a police officer, you could be dealing with animals, you could be an aircraft maintenance technician. In this case, you have to have the corresponding experience as an aircraft maintenance technician in the military to count for those 30 months that is required for your A&P certification. Now, with that being said, not all experience counts in the eyes of the Federal Aviation Administration. If you're a guy that just worked on power plants, the engines, or you worked on just the airframe components, or you were a repair station and where they pretty much gave you the parts to repair them, you might not qualify for the full rating. However, you probably qualify for either the airframe portion by itself or the power plant portion. It all depends on what job code you have, and the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has broken down a good list of service branches, what job counts towards what. They already have people that have evaluated each job, and to see who gets what and who gets what experience. Now, once you have determined that you want to get your AP certification, what you then have to do is go to your local FSDO, Federal Standards District Office, which is a sub-office that oversees aviation for the FAA in their corresponding area. The Federal Standards District Office, there should be one per county. However, some counties are bigger than others or smaller than others, but typically there's one per county. Where I got mine in the Los Angeles area, there's one per the county of Los Angeles, which is in Long Beach. You go there, sometimes they have you schedule an appointment with them, or sometimes they have you just walk in. However, before I get there, look online or get your resources together to look up where is one located at. I went online, I Googled Federal Standard District Office near me, and the San Diego one popped up. I'm in Southern California, by the way. The San Diego one popped up, the Los Angeles one popped up. But go there, and then once you go there, they pretty much give you a rundown of what is required per the Federal Aviation Administration. So they break down your job, they look you up, they say, hey, you know what? We need a letter of eligibility from your commanding officer in the military. So you can't just go up there and say, I have these amount of hours, sign me off so I could take your corresponding test. No, you have to go to your commanding officer of maintenance, or your commanding officer. He has to approve of you that you have what you say you have, which is the minimum 30 months on the job training time. Once your commanding officer sees that, you're then required to provide a certificate of eligibility from him to show as proof to the Federal Standard District Office, as well as your MOS code and your discharge of service, your DD 214, or your statement of service saying that you have served in the military, or that you are in the military. All they want to see is your proof that you're in the military, your job code, and that certificate of eligibility from your commanding officer. Once you have those three, at that point you take it to the FSDO, the Federal Standards District Office, and they have one of their inspectors determine your file, determine your paperwork, and determine if at that point he wants to sign up for your experience so you could take a series of tests. These tests are, well, a portion of these tests are 3 written tests and 2 in-person tests, which are an oral and a practical examination. Now, these 3 written tests are airframes, general, and power plants. Each of those written tests has 100 questions each, which you're expected to know and pass those tests. Once you have passed those tests, at that point you get with the FSDO and they schedule you a designated examiner that examines you orally with questions from the test it's pretty much an oral test with all those tests in mind, and he gives you oral questions and you have to answer them orally. Once you have done that and you pass that portion of it, at that point you're on to your last test, which is your practical. The same examiner gets with you and he has you do things like use calibrated tools, use safety wire, use things that are hands-on that he wants to see, that to deem you that you have that experience to do the practical portion of the test, which is basic mechanics. Once you have done that and you pass that portion, at that point he signs you off and you have completed all portions that are required to get that certification. Once you've done that, you are now airframes and power plants, or singly airframes or power plants mechanic. Now, I know that was a lot that I covered, but one of the biggest things that I encountered on my journey through that is that there could be times where you have doubts of completing the whole process. It is not a short process. You can't just do this overnight. It takes weeks, months. In my case, it took months to get people to sign me off, to get where I needed to go, to find numbers, phone numbers, to find offices, to get everything situated to where I got that certification. So this process could be quite tedious, and I just don't want people tearing my presentation to get discouraged of their process. Also, you will find a lot of people that, they want to do good and give you helpful information, but it's not necessarily from the source. The source is the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 14, which I will link with this video, as well as the FAA website, where you can find the actual black and white sources for your requirement to get certification. Like I said, do not get discouraged of the whole process. It is a process, and in some cases you might fail the test, or you might not do so well on it and you have to retake it. Don't get discouraged. I've in my process, in my journey, I failed a portion of the test to where I had to come back 2 weeks later and study some more to come back and retake that test. That being said, it could be done. It's just a matter of effort and willingness to finish the whole process. What you could do, what this does for you, is that instead of going to a 2-year vocational school, you pretty much skip all that because you already have the experience and you're pretty much sent to take the test and test out. I work for Skywest Airlines now, and I've talked to certain people, several mechanics, about this, and they say they went to 2-year vocational schools and where they paid upwards from $10,000, $20,000, even $30,000 on the school. So you do all that and you save yourself time and money. Also, what I recommend is before you take the test portion, before you take the written test and the practicals and the oral test, I recommend going online, doing your research, and researching for crash courses. There's these 2-week or 1-week crash courses where they pretty much, you go there full time and they help you study from the study guides, what's going to be on the written, what to expect, what's going to be on the practical, what to expect. They pretty much give you a general rundown of what to expect on the test. For 2 weeks, you're pretty much crammed with information on learning the matter and getting refreshed to pass the test. That's pretty much it. I will post links in the video to help guide you. And yeah, I wish all of you the best of luck. Thank you.